name is Peter Topalvik. I'm from the city of Hamilton. Unfortunately, not Hamilton, Bermuda. It's Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, which is very similar to Bermuda, except it lacks the tropical locale and the wonderful beaches. Otherwise, it's quite beautiful, and I encourage you to come. I'll give you a bike tour, or I'll take you on a canoe ride. Whatever's typically Canadian, I'll wear what's it called, a red plaid, and other things that are typically Canadian. And I'll say sorry a lot. So the theme for this conference obviously is moving forward together. It implies the public sector, private sector, nonprofit sector, and the academic sector all actually coming together to solve bike-share problems. And I think we're doing a good job. How many feel that we're actually moving forward together? Woo! Yeah, and again, we want to hear your personal stories about that too, but I think that was what we named the conference for in terms of that context, but also we're seeing that the industry is coming together in other ways. And we're making room for new forms of mobility. For instance, I will now be able to realize my childhood dream of being able to scooter everywhere and anywhere I want to go. And just when I thought nothing could change more than what changed last year with a completely different industry, we've changed again. So I'm really excited for next year's changes as well. But certainly, even though we're in a state of flux, it's important for us to make sure that we're having these conversations and working together as a community of unlikely partners. We are, the unusual suspects potentially in terms of how we'll be relating together, but we're doing that. And I think that one group, someone who sort of embodies this idea of moving forward together is actually realized in what the work that John Zimmer has been doing from Lyft, and I want to introduce him as he's going to say a few words to start our day. And well, first of all, I'm told that he got his start daydreaming in a city planning class. I'm sure a lot of us have been there. And I guess in that daydream, he realized, or maybe from the professor, that 96% of vehicles are just parked all day, and 20% of the seats are occupied. I think this was his motivating factor. I think for a lot of us, I feel the same as you. When I was in the city planning class and realizing, what's going on, that motivated a lot of us. I think we all share in that motivation. And he eventually co-founded Zimmer, which he did not name after himself, I'm told. And eventually that became Lyft. And again, Lyft's goal was to improve people's lives by creating transportation in cities that are affordable, sustainable, community-oriented. And now, launched in 2012, they're currently available to 96% of the U.S. population, but also in Toronto and actually Hamilton as well, Hamilton, Ontario, and also Ottawa. They provide about 10 million rides per week and growing. I want to thank you for, you have a slide. Thank you for being our platinum sponsor, and also thank you for saying a few words as we move into our panel.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today, and I really respect and appreciate the significance of being in Portland with such great infrastructure for bikes and ridership leading the country. So this is a perfect place for me to speak for the first time about the public vision that we have for bikes. And to start, I'd quickly like to introduce myself and share with you why I care so deeply about our work. So growing up, I didn't think I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. In fact, when I was little, I wanted to be a magician. I went to magic camp. And for me, there was nothing better than seeing the look on people's faces when I did a magic trick. I loved making people happy. And that joy of getting people to smile is actually quite similar to what everyone feels when they ride a bike. And as you all know, and as you have been fighting for, this joy that comes from riding a bike is very powerful and important. By the time I got to high school, I had mostly given up on magic, but I still looked for ways to create those shared moments of happiness. And so at the age of 16, I convinced the general manager of the local Hyatt hotel to give me a job as a phone operator. And in the role, I always tried to make each guest's experience a little bit better. So if someone called down and said that their light was broken, and I heard kids in the background, I always tried to send up milk and cookies or something to make them have a better day. And for college, I wanted to learn more about hospitality and this idea of service and delight and how to do it at large scale. And so I went to Cornell Hotel School. And in my senior year, I took this city planning class that allowed me to start thinking about the idea of hospitality outside of hotels, and more broadly is how do you bring that into everyday life. And that spark came from that Green Cities class that I took. And the professor, Rob Young, became a key mentor in my life. And he even officiated my wedding, which was my wife's idea. But it worked out well. Rob was the smartest, most well-read, most rational optimist I've ever known. And so that gives me immense hope. And it's easy today to be pessimistic in society. The moment we're in with, at a macro level on politics, politics are on fire, people are being drawn apart by our leaders. In our cities, population and traffic is increasing, and some companies are seemingly at odds with local planners. But my mentor passed away earlier this year, and at his service, upon giving my remarks, something inside me changed. I took on his fight more strongly than ever before. And his fight was to have our cities rebuilt around humanity, equality, and sustainability. And his fight was fueled by the optimism that we will win because of people like you, and because today, more than ever, we have the resources needed to realize Rob's green cities. Rob's fight is why I started Lyft, and is the reason why we've taken a very specific and measured approach to bike sharing. Lyft's work with bikes and scooters is being guided by 4 key tenets: transportation equity, safer streets, transit integration, and environmental sustainability. First, we've committed over $1 million alongside local nonprofits to bring transportation equity to underserved neighborhoods. And it's not lost on me, and I don't take lightly the fact that bikes are an incredible enabler of social and economic mobility. Lyft's bikes and scooters will bring mobility options to communities that have been historically underserved. We will work alongside local nonprofits and community groups across the country to ensure that transportation access and affordability are provided to those that need it most. Second, we'll make it easy for passengers to use bikes and scooters to connect to transit in partnership with local governments. We are being very thoughtful and intentional about how we enter Bikeshare. This includes our recent agreement to acquire Motivate. We could have launched a separate brand at odds with the longer-term transit infrastructure that local governments like Portland have been investing in, but we instead chose to put our resources behind Motivate's model of public and private partnership. I believe strongly in the power of the dock and station-based bike share when it is at scale, and that requires long-term bets, deep city partnership, and significant capital to achieve. We will have a product for every city, a range of products, including Lock 2, but we also caution a move away from long-term infrastructure as it provides key benefits for transit integration, reliability, and the logistics required for an electric bike future. Third, we are committed to making Vision Zero a reality. Lyft is in a unique position to drive positive change, and we've never taken that responsibility lightly. It is our responsibility to make sure streets are safe to best serve our communities, and we'll continue to grow partnerships with organizations like Together for Safer Roads that stand beside local bike and pedestrian advocates to help protect all our communities. Last, we will use our platform to shift mode share away from cars and into bike share. In 2017, 250,000 Lyft passengers gave up their personal vehicles. This shift, in addition to our carbon neutral initiative, in which all emissions from Lyft rides are offset, is just a start. By promoting bikes and transit to our users, we will increase the pace of this trend and further reduce personal car ownership. Together, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the private and public sectors to work together to make our cities designed for people and not cars. We see the introduction of our bikes and scooters to our city's shared transit ecosystem as one more step in Lyft's civic responsibility. We have a long way to go until our cities, our politics, and our companies are redesigned with people and service at their core. And as a father, I'm more motivated than ever. It's up to all of us, as parents, as an industry, and as a country, to bring Rob's Green Cities forward. I'm optimistic that with your help, we can and will build a more hospitable, a more healthy, and a more magical world. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just going to Instagram this moment. So, last year, we actually set a Guinness World Book of Record for the largest panel ever to occur at a conference, clocking in at over 12. We think there might have been 14. We weren't really sure, lost count. But this year, we have a more manageable panel of 7. And you really represent a diverse range of opinions and interests and perspectives on Bikeshare. So we're very, I mean, not to put lots of pressure on you, but you're going to be the best panel of any conference this year. So no pressure, but we want to call you up here now to take your seats. Your names are on these seats over here, so you know where to sit. And if you come up, we'll get started with the question and answers. We're going to go with, please feel free. As they come up, they're going to get 1 minute, one very strict minute to tell us about who they are, where they're coming from, what they represent, and what they're most excited about in terms of Bikeshare. Very tall order for 1 minute. I also want to call up my co-host, Wafia, from the Better Bikeshare Partnership. I guess you're doing this. We're going to go back and forth, asking questions and learning about the great perspectives we have on this. And then we're hoping that you're taking notes and using Instagram to capture anything that you want to ask. I don't know how that relates, but capture the things you want to ask, because we're going to go to a full Q&A. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Wafia to introduce our panel.
Hello, everyone. So, I don't know if you've heard or noticed, but ride sharing is changing, right? We got bike share, car share, scooter share, helicopter share. Everybody's sharing. It's great. But it's a lot of change, and a lot of change happening very rapidly. A lot of people are wondering, what does all this change mean? What does it mean for our communities, for our neighbors, for our residents? How do we make these changes equitable? How are we making changes that the community really wants to see? And how are we including them in this decision process? So I'm excited to have this awesome group of panelists and experts to just share their thoughts on some of these rapid changes, and to hopefully answer some of the burning questions that a lot of us all have. So I'm going to, Peter, you can join me back.
Oh, yes. Oh, right.
Yes, we have microphones. Put one on each side. So I am going to start it off with the first question. Oh, I'm sorry. Please introduce yourselves. Sorry. I was like trying to get to it. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ryan Japetsky, the founder and CEO of Jump. We've been at this quite a long time. Company was first incorporated in 2010. And we're the first to kind of commercialize a dockless bike or a smart bike. And I think what I'm most excited about is just how many new companies are coming into the space, how much new innovation, how much new resources. For all these years, we wanted the industry to grow in this way. We wanted to make this massive change. And there really wasn't the resources behind it. And now there is. There's companies like Lyft and Uber that are out there. And lots of more resources coming in, so it's really exciting.
Hi, my name is Allison Cohen. I lead Bicycle Transit Systems. We operate 4 cities, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Las Vegas, and Oklahoma City. I think I've actually been at this even longer than Ryan. I started a company back in 2007 called Blue Bike, B-L-O-O Bike. So it had 2 O's for the bicycle in Boston, and so Boston has now changed to Blue Bikes, and I feel like I was way ahead of my time. And I was a co-founder of Alta Bicycle Share and launched a bunch of big cities there, and worked with Tool Design Group in consulting before we started Bike Transit. In terms of what I'm excited about, I think with the onset of electric bikes, I'm sort of sick of bike share being talked about as first and last mile solution. I want it to be the whole solution.
Hey everyone, I'm Caroline Sampanero. I'm the head of bike, scooter, and pedestrian policy at Lyft. A position I never would have dreamed a year ago would exist at Lyft. So super happy to be here with so many friendly faces that I know from over the years. Prior to joining Lyft, I spent 2 months at OFO, and prior to that, 12 years helping run transportation alternatives in New York City. So I've met many of you during that time. I'm most excited about, I think the future of Bikeshare depends on docks. I'm a big believer, and I think the space-taking benefits, the place-making benefits, the way that we can bring together the goals around charging, and really like reclaiming streets for people. I think Bikeshare has a huge role to play in making that happen, and I think at this crossroads moment that we find ourselves, with more resources, more people, we can do that bigger and better than we've ever done it before. So super psyched to be a part of that.
Hi everybody, my name is Rio Oshas. I'm with People for Mobility Justice. We just rebranded from MCM, Multicultural Communities for Mobility. I am the policy and programs organizer. Organizer is a very key term for my title because it talks about organizing with community and alongside community in finding out what the best solutions are for our transportation needs. So I just wanted to lift that for a second. Our team is amazing. I just want to give a big shout out to the whole family where we've been working really hard to make sure that mobility justice is centered, and our mission is, as Black, Indigenous people of color, we see critical consciousness around mobility justice, and our vision is to see people having the freedom and resources to move in public spaces with dignity and love. So that's kind of some of the wonderful work we've been doing. And just a little bit about myself, I began Bikeshare in 2002, believe it or not. It was at Arcata Library Bikes, and I'll come back to it later, but it is part of the future because in Arcata Library Bikes, it was really almost about giving away bikes for free, so if anybody was familiar with that. But I'll come back to that a little bit later.
Hi, I'm Jillian Gillette. I'm current, despite the title and my title in the handbook. My job has recently changed. I am now the transportation coordinator for the San Francisco Department of Public Works, and I am charged with streamlining permits in San Francisco. Wish me luck. I was in my previous job, I was the policy architect for our regional Bikeshare program. Because of the nature of the Bay Area, we have a lot of bikes on trains, and we have a lot of interconnecting systems across cities, so we really needed to have a regional approach. And as somebody whose background before coming to the public sector was in business process modeling and workflow, I'm sort of a systems person. I think that bikes are fantastic, and I think that the recent marriage of tech, venture capital, and transportation is a thing of beauty, not without some difficulties, but welcome to the club of trying to make the world a better place, tech.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Warner. I am the interim director of the Portland Bureau of Transportation. Before my life at the Bureau itself, I worked in City Hall, and one of the things that we worked on in the last few years was the actual implementation of Bikeshare in the city of Portland. I know I've heard from a lot of folks about, oh, Portland is great, but we were, I think, like 64th in terms of getting Bikeshare, so we waited to get it right, so knock on wood. We're very excited about hosting you today. Welcome to Portland, and also working with Ryan, because Sobe was is the bike that we had chosen and really created the ecosystem for kind of the dockless system on a large scale. So we're proud of that, but we're also looking forward to the future because, as you know, things are changing every day.
My name is Courtney Williams. I started a bicycle advocacy firm called the Brown Bike Girl. And what bicycle advocacy is me helping organizations who have the will to do equitable work for the benefit of communities of color, to help them access and adopt bicycling as a lifestyle. What I bring to this whole table is helping an organization do it right. Right, you can do it, but did you do it right? Did you do it sensitively, competently, and effectively for the needs of the people of color? I bring urban planning background, I bring entrepreneurship background, and a lifelong commitment to project management on behalf of brown people. So listen to women of color, I'll just say that. What I'm most excited about right now is two things, which is continuing to help you as my colleagues with cultural competency for your organizations through things like my outside advocate training that teaches us how to do outreach the right way and not commit historical crimes again. And then also, I'm excited about Bikeshare in terms of seeing it in New York City, where I'm based, to actually be a solution to the problems we're about to face while our L train goes out for the next 4 years, to see that Bikeshare solve a problem that needs to be solved and not just an elective optional riders.
All right, so let's get started. First question. What does equitable access to dockless or dock-based bike share look like? What does equitable access to dockless or dock-based bike share look like?
I'd be happy to take a shot at this. So I think many people in this room have been thinking for a long time about what the definition of equity is and what equity means in bike share. When we started Capital Bike Share in 2010, DDOT defined equity as stations in every ward. And that was impactful at the time. Since then, the industry has matured a ton, and there's a ton of data. We're an operating company that has helped us to really deeply define what equity looks like for bike share. In non-data terms, I think of it as equal service and equal access. So making sure that the bikes are taken care of as well in any area of the city, and that any person living in an area of the city has equal access to that. The way we look at it in measuring are the demographics of the people using any particular station reflect the demographics of a neighborhood. The quantity of rides in a particular neighborhood is equitable, adjusted for density. And the passes offered reflect the types of ridership that might be used in different areas. So, and just I had an aha moment recently. I have a bunch of little kids, and we were in Boston recently, and we stayed in an outer neighborhood, and I was looking for a playground to go to, and I just looked on the map. I said, let's go to this playground, and it happened to be in a low-income neighborhood, and I went there, and it was one of the nicest playgrounds I've ever seen. And we walked in, and someone immediately walked up to us and said, I haven't seen you here before. You know, welcome, and I take care of this playground. And to me, that was an aha moment of what equity looks like. Wherever you go in a city, you get equal service, and you might find that in some outer neighborhood, or you might find it in the gem or the heart of downtown. So taking that to bike share, you know, we've looked at that with data.
And I can chime in also. So I'm going to preface this by saying I love bicycles. If you know me, you know that I consider myself to have a self-doctorate on bicycles. But a lot of the equity work, I think, gets confused that we can just blanket what equity looks like across the nation, even across a city, right? And so for me, when you're thinking about equity, dockless or not, whatever, that actually doesn't really matter. You actually have to think about the neighborhood, and that you're actually putting at the forefront the community's needs and desires around it. There's some communities who might not even be able to have access to it, right? Like let's imagine a group of elderly people. Like bike share might not be the spot right there, right? So I just really urge people that when you're thinking about equity, really do the assessment to have it be community-led, neighborhood by neighborhood. It really changes. You can't blanket it across a whole city and think that that's the most accessible thing. So I just wanted to remind you about that as far as equity goes, and yeah, so I just wanted to put that in.
Yes, if you've heard me speak in any of the other sessions, either as a moderator or anything else, my biggest bone to pick with bike share is the pattern in which it grows and what harm it can do when the habitual pattern of growth is to drop our bike share first where it is white and affluent, because the model says that it will succeed best there. But if we are, as bike share operators and supporters, going to tout it as a public utility, if we're going to tout it as an equity solution, then we need to put it in the places for whom people need the greatest help, which means you're going to have to, if you are willing, as you should be if you're touting equity, to grow from the outside in, because the pattern of American cities has been cultivated such that there were people of color in the center, then they got pushed out, and now they're on the outer sides. And yeah, I know that bike share succeeds best when there's a critical mass and when the income is a certain level, but if this is about solving people's problems, this is about giving people access, it's about helping them not two trains or two buses to the train instead going directly there, then we need to make equitable solutions accessible to the people who need the equity.
I might piggyback on that. I think a great example that's always been really inspiring to me is the work that the New York City Bikeshare team has done with Bedford, in Bedford-Stuyvesant, empowering bedside restoration to just be the lead on Bikeshare and equity programming. And I think, it's one thing, and I totally agree, Courtney, that the infrastructure needs to be equitably distributed, but that's not enough, I think we know. So it's also empowering local communities to take the lead and to come up with systems and programs that are going to support what the community needs. And I think oftentimes it seems like in Bikeshare, because the focus is often on operations and hardware, sometimes we forget the human capital component, the people component of the system, and the ways that you bring a neighborhood to life or a neighborhood to the table to make the system work. And so I think the bedside restoration work has been a really incredible model that we can make bigger across the country through all of us working together.
One other quick thing I wanted to add, and this is a kind of another equity issue we're dealing with here in the city of Portland, is when we launched Bikeshare, we didn't have any kind of bike share for people that can't ride a conventional bike. So we have an adaptive bike share system that we're working with a local NGO, and in fact, I think we just got we were able to get 2 new powered trikes with the sponsorship and help of Nike, which will actually help people that might not be able to ride a conventional bike. So I think they have 13 other bikes, and so we are rolling that into our system. So to make sure that it's about the geography of where people live in the city, but it's also about their abilities as well. So we want to make sure that we make bicycling as available to just all of our citizens, and as you said, we got a lot of work to do.
I'd just like to say I'd like to see all of this convert into ridership. It's one thing about providing access and putting stations in neighborhoods, and it's another about having a ridership that reflects the composition of your city. And I think there's a lot more we can do in terms of how we're marketing programs and how we're doing outreach in the community to actually make it feel like this is a solution for the people in those cities, in those parts of the city. And a lot of these communities have really bad transportation problems and a really big transportation need, and are open to improving their commute. If you're taking 2 buses to get to a train, or you have a really long commute, you're open for solutions. So we're failing to we're failing to communicate properly if we're not able to convert that into ridership. And so I hope that we actually move the needle on the people that are actually on the bikes and how often they're using them.
Great, thanks, guys. And you're very well, and you're self-organizing. I love it. You guys know you're taking turns well. Our second question is, what role does Bikeshare have in so you talked about community and some treatable things like people first and customized outreach and education. Very good stuff. But speaking of the role of Bikeshare in the community, what role should it have then? So what is this role? You brought us to the community level, but what is the role of that? The Bikeshare there. How can it help?
So this morning, if you woke up, at 9 a.m., we talked about racial profiling and Bikeshare and the necessity for Bikeshare operators as well as their colleagues and the Department of Transportation and those types of authorities to recognize that you all are a platform in which the rest of nature and society will take place. And so what is the role of Bikeshare? Well, obviously, it's all the things we want it to be. It's the freedom and happiness of riding a bicycle. It's the Band-Aid between the transit situation. But if we're talking about the role of Bikeshare as in the people who compose these companies and make the movement and make the decisions, you all are as equally available and charged with the responsibility of championing equity and solutions to society's ills. And when we know that when people see people of color on bikes, especially when they see people on Bikeshare bikes and decide that person shouldn't have access to that bike, they're suspicious just by existing, then it is your role to combat your piece of, this societal ill on your platform. So yeah, Bikeshare's role is to kind of make up for all of what hasn't happened in the rest of bicycling that necessarily wasn't about Bikeshare. Our problems with the lack of diversity in bicycling in general as a lifestyle is something that people of color find accessible or don't find accessible began with, there's a story of the League of American Bicyclists kicking all the black people out in 1894, and that never got fixed until 1999. They were like, oh, we should have apologized for that, right? So this legacy is behind your industry. You've inherited it. Sorry, we all inherit something. So you have to work at undoing it as well.
I'm based in Los Angeles, and we were working with Metro for a while on BTS, actually, so it's really good to see Pete and other folks here. And one of the things we were doing when we were going out to community is we found that really Bikeshare actually felt like there was dissonance, that it wasn't for us, that it was a tool of gentrification, that it was a tool of displacement. And unfortunately, Bikeshare is being viewed that way by community at the moment, and particularly because a lot of people just had Bikeshare show up the next day. It's like, I live here, I work here, I own a shop here, and nobody even told me about Bikeshare coming in. It just showed up one day, right? Which talks a lot about like the dissonance that is happening with community and transit agencies, et cetera. So it's a little bit disheartening to see that, because again, I love bikes, but to have bikes become a tool of displacement is really hard, right? And unfortunately, it does bring those elements with it. So there's a sense of responsibility there. And I'm glad that Metro has taken a stand around that, which meant they passed the transit-oriented communities, so please check that out, and also an equity platform framework. Now, this is post a lot of the work we did, so this is very recent. It's only in the last couple months that just passed, but I'm really hopeful about that, because for me, what Bikeshare could be used is, can community own it? Can community see themselves in it? Can they be working it? Can they be making money from it? Can they be building their careers from it, right? All these things are very important, especially when we talk to undocumented laborers. They said, hey, it doesn't matter if it's 25 cents per day. If I can't afford it because I don't have a job, I can't get on it, period. So it doesn't even matter how affordable you make it, right? Because jobs are what's needed. And in the Bikeshare equity, you have to think holistically. It's not just about, the Bikeshare itself, the tool needs to be equitable. It also has to be reflected in your company and your staff and all the personnel and all the marketing and all that stuff. It has to be reflected there as well. So the devils are in the detail with equity. It's not just what you put out on the street, it's also internally. What is your internal politics look like? What does your internal values look like? And are you really centering and lifting those at the margins in your company and backing them with resources, right? So that to me would be the best way to like really incorporate Bikeshare in a holistic, equitable way.
I guess a couple things. One, there is an opportunity for a lot of job creation as part of this, and the great thing about our industry is it creates a wide range of jobs, from more mechanical jobs to customer service jobs to technology jobs. We should all be hiring a diverse candidate pool and allowing for advancement opportunities within that. So that's one piece. And then the second is transportation is a fundamental need. This isn't really like a luxury. Getting around your community is a need. And Bikeshare can provide connectivity to other parts of your community, connectivity to new job opportunities. And so, it can make our cities way more livable, and in the communities that we're operating in, more accessible.
Yeah.
So I feel really, didn't answer the last question, and I talked about whether or not I should answer this one. I don't think I can give an answer. I think San Francisco is maybe an object lesson in what happens if you don't do any of this the right way. So the biggest problem that we have in San Francisco is that we didn't build enough housing for 60 years. Our housing policy has been pretty racist and exclusionary for a very long time. And we've succeeded in creating a very wealthy city, and a lot of residents feel very entitled. We don't have very much diversity by any measure. And so we also, because of the economy, have a lot of churn in San Francisco. So we've been adding 10,000 people a year since about 2009. It's an unprecedented era of growth for us. But the way that we get to those 10,000 new people every year in San Francisco is that 70,000 people come and 60,000 people leave every year. Most of the 60,000 people who leave are people in that cohort of 70,000 people who came in that same year. They tried to make a home in San Francisco and they just couldn't afford it. So it's a little difficult for me to ask Bikeshare to solve a problem that's really rooted in land use and sort of racist housing policy. But I think as a sort of pure data question, if you have that kind of churn and you have so little ability to connect with people because of the churn, Bikeshare, because now it's heavily enabled by tech and iPhones, presents an opportunity to think about different ways to connect with people. Can we really explore the new tools at our disposal, courtesy of the internet and things like the iPhones, to figure out new and different ways to attract people who don't have the benefits of being in a city in a long time, for a long time?
Thank you. Rio, you made a really good point earlier about how the devil is in the details. And with that, a common question that's always thrown around is Bikeshare transit? And if so, how should it be funded? So what do you guys think about that?
Bicycle transit systems?
Yeah. Well, I remember being in NABSA 3 or 4 years ago, exact same question. I mean, this is like, press play and press repeat. We've been having this debate, and we've gone through cycles of, I think it started in 2009, the advertising model, cities aren't going to fund Bikeshare. That didn't work out. So then there are a few large cities who went towards funded Bikeshare. That worked great. Then New York said, we're not going to fund Bikeshare. So then we went back to privatized. There's been, a little bit of some public funding, and now venture capital's in it. So, I mean, I can't claim to know the answer to this, and I think it's really going to be a public policy question for cities, for the state and federal government. And we are in an era of a federal administration where clearly it's not, Bikeshare is not going to be on some major funding streak. But in 2 years that could change, or in 6 years that could change, and we could all be saying, we're selling Bikeshare as transit, and there's going to be major integration, and Bikeshare can be a tax write-off. So this is, in my mind, really a political question. My personal opinion, especially, we can't be having these conversations about community and equity if it's not public transit. That's just the fact of the matter. Bikeshare doesn't make money. Everyone in this room who's run a Bikeshare system knows it's not, at this moment in time, an extremely profitable business. So most people in this room have used the term fare box recovery. Profitable businesses do not talk about fare box recovery. And fare box recovery is a public transit term. And so if we are going to even mention Bikeshare and community engagement and social equity in the same, it has to have some amount of public funding behind it. Otherwise, we can talk all we want, but I hope someday it makes a lot of money, and I'm sure these folks do as well. But at this moment, it needs to be public transit if we're going to fulfill any of the goals of cities or equity.
Yes.
I think there's also a serious equity question around this question, right? Because the way that we fund transportation in the U.S. is so out of whack. This room knows that better than anyone. I was doing a little looking around at economics before the panel, and I didn't really know this stat, so there's 8 car parking spots for every car in the US, which amounts to $100 billion a year in subsidy to drivers, right? So when we talk about our cities and the ways we invest in our cities' transportation systems, it becomes super critical that both the private sector and the public sector are investing real money in biking as a solution. We can't drive our way out of the problems that we face in cities, whether they're environmental, whether they're related to our transit system. So making the connections easier to transit through bikes becomes a practical and tangible way that cities can work with private companies to solve big problems, and also to right the wrong of the way that we've spent on transportation to date. Because that spending isn't equaling more equitable transit networks. It's not equaling a balanced budget. So it's not like we're doing it right now. So yeah, I think more spending on both sides is super critical. And I think in that sense, we're building a new form of public transportation.
I can't even pretend to be in the right wheelhouse when it comes to saying where the funding should come from. I will say that taxation without representation is very much still a thing. It's kind of fundamentally American. And if our departments of transportation, if our police departments, if any of them are spending significant time partnering with our bike share operators, if they are policing their in favor of our bike share operators' interest, then this does make it a public matter, and everybody should be accessing these things, and it is inherently an equity issue. And to the first speaker's point about if it's not publicly funded, then it can't be an equity issue, I just must say that that is a dangerous mindset that I don't feel can be allowed to perpetuate itself, because it sets up this either or situation. Either it's public, and therefore because public is the government looks out for everybody, and that's when equity is supposed to happen. But that is not the case. Equity and the will to take care of other human beings is a personal, individual thing. It's just as Keith Benjamin yesterday pointed out for us, systems don't fail us. People fail to build a system that accounts for humanism and righteousness. So yeah, equity is what you all internalize and then shine out into your work and what you do. So I just want to put that out there.
I'd like to build on that a little bit. I think these systems are operating in the public right of way, so there's always going to be some sort of public component to that. And I think there's an opportunity for cities to set the rules of the game a little bit, to say, if you're going to operate in this community, these are objectives that we want to achieve. How are you going to help us achieve these objectives? I don't think that means they have to actually fund the system. And I think for the next 5 years, there's enough private dollars that are willing to come into this that they won't have to. And that doesn't mean they can't ask for these things. Whether it's data or equity or these things that cities care about, I think there's there's a lot of willingness to actually partner on that. So I think that for the near term, there's going to be a lot of private investment. I guess the question is, half the companies that were here last year are not here this year. Is this all going to go boom and bust again? Is all the scooters companies going to be gone next year? That's like, I think, a lot of the things I'm hearing in the hallways. I will say that the difference between the first wave of those dockless bikes and scooters and electric bikes is that the business actually looks to be good. You're doing a lot of trips per bike. It's generating a lot of revenue per bike. We're having cities like Sacramento and Santa Cruz that we didn't expect big numbers. In the original bike share model, we're thinking 1 or 2 trips per bike per day would be happy, and we're doing many multiples of that. So I think there is a business there, so that means there will be private investment, and that doesn't mean the city can't accomplish these goals, and these companies should want to work toward those goals.
I guess I'd just add one quick thing, just the experience we had here on the left coast in a medium-sized city. The reason we were 64th is because we made a conscious decision as a council not to put any public money into it. In terms of city of our general transportation revenue, we just didn't do it. So we were lucky enough to, we got a federal grant that we kind of held on to it for a long time until we were able to engage a sponsor that has been very generous with us and has actually created a good system. But otherwise, without that, we probably would not have the system we have because of a sponsor. So that's been our story. I know a lot of other cities have put in probably significant transportation dollars. We just haven't done it just because we have so many other needs within the city. So.
Yeah, let me echo that too from the Bay Area's perspective. I mean, we've had a long-standing regional and local policies in favor of biking and in favor of cycling infrastructure and in support of a bike share system. However, like Portland, we are completely unwilling to pay for it. That's just a fact. Our transit system is massively underfunded, and so we were unwilling to take money from transit to fund a new mode. But I guess my answer to is bike share transit, I would say, to me, it feels like bike share is like transit because transit exists in cities. And to me, part of what transit means is a pattern. a lack of range anxiety. You know, in cities with good transit and places where transit works, that in every couple of blocks there's going to be a station. There's going to be something for you that is publicly accessible, that is well regulated, that is safe, clean, and reliable. And Bikeshare is all of those things. And I don't think that it has to be publicly funded. I do think that it needs to be adequately regulated, but I think Bikeshare very much is transit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the adequate regulation. One of the things that makes me nervous about all the share mobility stuff is that it's going extremely fast, and that all these things are just being thrown into our communities without it having really good consent from communities, right? Like bird scooters just show up, and cities allow for companies to do that, right? So there's like in our capitalist USA, there's a lot of like freedom that corporations get, and it is a form of subsidy. So corporations have to be conscious of that already the right of public way that people are just getting in and trying to make money is a right of way when we have vendors, street vendors who are trying to sell fruits in LA and get like demoted, and they're making money on the streets too, right? Like we have to think about it. It's like, why is one business allowed to go take up space, why another businessman is not, because they're selling fruits, for example, right? So I wanted to underline that. And the other thing I wanted to underline was the taxation without representation. Like the question is, how are you engaging taxpayers, right? In your community, and that's all of them, including undocumented folks, because they pay as well taxes. How are you engaging them in questions about what their needs and desires are for Bikeshare, right? And this is both the task of our public agencies, but also of corporations. Like at the end of the day, you are in this society, right? So I just, and which is why I love the moving forward together piece, is that we are trying to move together, right? And so it does mean looking at that and taking financial responsibility for the way we use the tax dollars of our community members.
Thank you, everyone. That was a lot of great perspectives on that topic, and you guys said a lot of things, but obviously equity and transit are not just connected, but they go hand in hand. Public-private partnerships seem to be one of the ways forward, but partnership is really key. And so in this new world of this new transportation realm, I guess, that we're moving into, and shifting slightly gears, is what about, or how should we be thinking about data privacy then in this new world, this new mobility?
No, I think that's a great question. I mean, one of the things we've really worked on, both with Biketown and with the new scooter companies and with the TNCs as they've come into town, is how do we use that data there and not have it on a personal level, but use it so we can make better planning and transportation choices, because that data is really important as we try to plan our city. Our city is growing, more than it has in probably the last 50 years. So how do we do that? We have a very small, limited right-of-way. How do we move people in and out? We have an urban growth boundary around the city, which actually kind of constrains how we can move out, which is a good thing, but it also puts more pressure on the transportation system. So data, I think, can be a good thing in terms of, in the aggregate, as we make decisions about how people are traveling, because to us, that's kind of the key to keep people moving in our very, as you can see, very short blocks and small right-of-way.
All right, I'll take a whack at it. Look, I'm very concerned with what I've learned from this conference in watching some of my fellow cities think about data. I think many cities, it feels to me, have said, oh, there's a lot of data here. We couldn't, cleaning it, storing it, extracting it, analyzing it is not something that we can do. And that makes me somewhat happy, because I think that when you're talking about beginnings and endings of trips in cities, in not dense portions of cities, equity and privacy are strange bedfellows, right? They're at odds with one another here. We could do irreparable damage to our citizenry if we get this wrong. So I think that there's an awful lot of data coming from new mobility. That's great. We have this tremendous opportunity to learn more about ourselves and the way our cities work. I don't think that that data should be largely collected by cities. I think cities need to understand certain kinds of information about the transportation systems in order to make thoughtful decisions and thoughtful policy, but I don't think that we should be doing that transformation. I think it's too expensive to ask cities to do that, and it's hard. So I think that data should be collected, and I think over time, as the hardware and as the programs get more sophisticated, we have the opportunity to get even more information as we add different kinds of sensors and things to the vehicles and to the phones. But I think that we should think about new governance structures that are also probably public-private partnerships, where the data work and the data standards and the data modeling work sits through a trusted partner, but outside of cities, doing what cities need, but doing it for them. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, the real risk is that a lot of things can become public records requests. And so if we have the exact origin and destination and we give you a database of that, and somebody can get a hold of that, with 1 or 2 other data sources, they can start to have personally identifiable information. That's a real problem. So a lot of the companies in the private sector have been kind of raising this, saying, hey, we actually want to share route data. We want you to know where people are traveling on bikes because we see the value to that, but we have to do it in a certain way. So I think that there needs to be some collaboration between the public and private sector to get them what they need, to have a data standard so that we have across multiple different cities, hopefully the same sort of format for reporting. In a way that's still protecting privacy. And I think it's being done really ad hoc right now, and I'm hoping we can bring that together in a more focused way, in a careful way.
And actually, NAPSA probably has a big role to play in that, right? So this group of people can help maybe create a rational system across cities as we rethink what this industry is about and how people are getting around on bikes and what types of bikes. It seems like cities could use our support. So we're excited to be a part of that at Lyft. I also think it's important that we don't allow for like a mythology to exist around data and what data is going to accomplish. I've been in all the conversations I have with bike advocates in cities where we work, and then also with our city partners, I ask the question like, okay, when you have this data finally that proves that people want to ride a bike on that street that you think is only for cars right now, there's never been a bike lane there, people don't want a bike lane there, will you now get to build a bike lane there, you know? Now that you have this evidence. And it doesn't seem like the answer is like a sure thing yes. So it still will be super important that advocates are our partners in this industry so that we can empower them with the information that we gain from our ridership and help them make the case more strongly for bike lanes and the kind of infrastructure changes we need, taking space from cars and giving it to bikes. I think that part, which is really, I think, the point of the data, according to the cities I've spoken to, helping that come together is, I think, something that we need to be a part of making happen with the folks that aren't in this room, the advocates.
Yeah, and marrying a data comment back to equity, I made in Philadelphia, we collect generalized demographic information, and that has been extremely important to help us understand if we're actually achieving or underachieving or overachieving our equity goals. So that becomes really sticky when it comes to ridership data. And so I think that demographic information is really important. And I think the work that NABSA in particular has done is a really great starting point. And the anonymized data sets that most systems release on a quarterly basis, I think is a great start. And I think the thing that worries me the most with the onset of significantly privatized systems is how do we know the data is accurate? I mean, there are many examples of data being released over the last year since the dockless phenomena has happened, and we know that the numbers, if they're based on calculations, are not very accurate. And so I think understanding the source of that data and having a lot of faith that the data being reported is accurate and connecting that to demographic information to see if we are achieving an equitable bike share system or where we can improve is going to be really important, but that's really hard.
I believe it was, I can't see through you. I just want to say that, yeah, to Caroline, I think you said knowing the point of your data collection, was that you? It absolutely matters. If you've ever built any system that is communicative in nature, from building a website, you build out the structure of what am I writing and where am I putting it and why first, because when you just go for, let me collect a big swath of data, you are collecting what might become unnecessary information. But data is valuable across the board. In our society now, it is gold. And if you don't know what to do with it, somebody else does. So it's very important to be intentional about that data collection, because it can have, as Aunt you pointed out, somebody might want to use public records. Somebody might want to triangulate. I mean, even as a writer myself who does long distances and goes out, I use Strava, you know, and you can see where I've been. And until I learned that you can see where my house is at and I put up this buffer, people could find me. You know, I have 1,000 followers. Somebody could come knock on my door. They found an army base because the soldiers were going on runs in Afghanistan, tracking themselves on their Fitbit, and it led to dire consequences. So yes, please be very intentional from the offset with your data collection.
Can I take one? I'd like to take just a little bit more stab at that to try to drive these points home a little bit further. So, you know, last year we had dockless bike share. This year we have scooters. We're going to keep having these things, right? So, you know, I'm at Public Works, but my colleagues at MTA are responsible for permitting things that are related to mobility, even though scooters are largely on the sidewalks. But I digress. But this is not going to go away. The need for these bodies of people thinking about these things intentionally and crafting an ongoing set of standards needs to be a living, breathing organization. We're not going to, you know, we're not going to ask NABSA to give us best practice guidance for bike share permits and then we'll be done with it, right? Like this is, you know, we haven't seen anything yet because the autonomous vehicles, they will be coming. And, you know, that's kind of where we're headed with all of this, right? You know, cities need to modernize. We can't get out of this. And we really have to think about optimizing the governance structures so that we get what we need in a really efficient way, because the kind of expertise that we need to think about these sophisticated data-related things are not things that cities typically do well or can afford. So we need to be very intentional about this. And I think that the great thing about it coming from bike share is that it seems to be a system of people and values that is more intentional than some of the other mobility modes that I've seen anyway. So, you know, bike share affords us the opportunity to take this in a thoughtful, stepwise fashion.
Thank you. Okay, one more question, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A, because I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions you want to get out there. So last question is, what does or what should the future of bike share look like?
I guess I can start. Actually, so going back to my point about being in bike share since 2002, which was with Arcata Library Bikes, this is how I really actually started this field that I'm in right now. A lot of what we were doing was literally using bikes like a library book. You would check them out like a library book, but it was pretty much free. It's pretty much free. And I don't know if people are familiar with Provo in like the Netherlands, anyways, or white bikes. Anybody familiar with this? So good, I see some heads, yay, good. So that's kind of some of the original bike share stuff. So I think a lot of it for me is also like, in what places and in what ways can we go back to the original roots of the bike share iteration we know now? And for those of you who are not familiar, white bikes were literally put together by Provo, who was an anarchist group who really wanted to make sure that cars were not going to continue to contaminate and take over cities, and literally become a tool and a resource for community for free. What a concept, right? You know, literally was like, let's paint these bikes white, and they'll be available for the public to use. And the idea was that genuinely, we're gonna share it. There's no cost. We're gonna trust each other that we're gonna put it out, we're gonna take it, and whatever. Obviously, there's some backlash, and a lot of that history now trails to where we're at right now today. But for me, a lot of that hope for what bike share can be is like, how can it serve the people? Literally, how can it really serve the people to be a resource? Again, we are people for mobility justice, so when we think about this, we think about how, in what ways can cities, transit agencies make bike share a true resource for free potentially, and for some communities. I know City Bike's doing that for some youth for like the first year. I think AJ pointed that out earlier today, which is awesome. Like we really should, and also how do we reward folks who are on bikes? Because ultimately, bikes are not polluting the world. That's awesome, right? Bikes are not polluting the world. It's making our neighborhoods a lot easier to navigate. So that's part of my dream, right? It's some of those pieces of that history. And you know, when I travel around in Latin American countries, like, people just share bikes because they just share bikes. It's like one bike for the community and everybody shares, right? Like, it's big and also really tiny. It's like an act of love, you know? So I hope that we can also see in what ways can we be inspired to love our communities and provide these resources without having the contention or tension of like, I got bills to pay, I got so-and-so to pay, to be like, no, these people need it because they need to get to their job, they need to get to their prenatal care, they need to get to whatever they need to get to, like, to make sure that they get to those spots. So just wanted to share that much. And I know we're closing a little bit, but there's some cards out there that I put out for you also. Yeah, just want to share that.
I think one thing is ubiquitous, and that means operating at scale, serving all parts of the city and serving all the people in that city. So we're subscale now, and we're certainly not serving all residents of the city. And so I think, like, the technology, the business models, those things are going to progress, and that's the goal, is getting something that is scaled up and provides a meaningful alternative to getting into a car and going from A to B. And so we have a lot of work to go till we're at more than a fraction of a percentage of trips in a city, and we're actually meaningfully moving people. So can we get to 20, 30, 40% mode share in a city? And I think the last thing is maybe we're not talking about bike share anymore. Maybe we're talking about shared electric, light mobility, whatever it is. We're talking about mobility. Bike is one device. There's going to be a whole range of devices that help meet that need. And collectively, we can start providing a real solution to the car. And so I think it's going to be bigger and more exciting and serve more people in the near future.
Future. What should bike share look like? I would like to see bike share, two things. I would like to see bike share and bike share operators operating out of integrity. And to that, it's again emphasizing the equity for people who need the solutions. And when they say things like, we're here to help the whole public, we're here for the whole bike community, to do it for the whole community. Because capitalism, which, private companies, at the end of the day, your goal is to make money, and nobody will doubt you or fault you for not trying to get the next rider in the most logical place. Capitalism doesn't require it of you. You got to pull it out of yourself. And to that end, I would like to see bike share companies taking more risks, and in that they will try to put themselves in the way of people of color, in the way of the rider who doesn't seem like they're going to be the rider, in the way of the person who's disabled and, they're not going to be the majority ridership, but basically reimagining innovation. For the bike share, this is my first conference, and so I'm really soaking in what is it that you all do, what is the conversations that you all are having. And right now in this moment switching between bike and scooter, or at least adding on scooters, the focus is our innovation is technological. What can we do to upgrade this bike? How can we put electric on it? How can we move on to the next thing? And not worry so much about the technological innovation, but the social innovations that you all need to be making to serve everyone. Because if we think about this in real context, we love to challenge ourselves as a culture to innovate for Africa, innovate for the third world country. And you go and figure out how to make salt water not salty, or how to make electricity out of a yam or something. Like, East Brooklyn kind of needs the same thing. Flit still need water. So why are we not motivated to innovate at home for our peers, for our fellow citizens? So that's what I would like to see Bike Share doing in the future.
I would agree, and I would like to rebut Brian a little bit. I do think that the business models and the technology will proceed apace, and that's kind of what worries me. I quit doing technology in order to get into public policy, and the world of technology is not an equitable place. It is an industry almost as bad as economics. If we let let a certain demographic determine the future of bike share business models and technology, we are in real trouble. Because the last time we had this kind of a revolution, we evicted a lot of people from their homes and drove freeways through their neighborhoods. Like, this is that time again, guys. So we need to be much more thoughtful and much more inclusive, because we have a chance to fix a lot of things that we really, really screwed up in the 1940s through the 1960s. And it's really important that we get it right.
Yeah, I would like to see in a future of bike share that we are not fighting over this little piece of public space that's on the side of the roads. And when the cars are taking up 70% of the space, I would like to see this group plus the scooters plus the, we have a lot of stuff going on among us, and I would like to see us band together so that the bike share station and the space that we're taking on the streets is actually taking up space that was, once taken by cars. And I think that's going to be a major community center. It can be a place where people can do autonomous vehicle pickups or scooter pickups or bike pickups. I also, the other piece of the future that I'd like to add to is I think bike share and scooters now, and Dockless did, it developed as, here's a product, this is something the city wants or a company thinks is good for people and will solve some problems. Certainly has solved a lot of problems, but what has not fundamentally happened in bike share is really understanding all sorts of different types of people and their problems, and how are we going to solve it. And I think I saw Jillian speaking at a conference last fall, and she said something to the effect that every single day there are millions of families in a daily crisis of how to get their kids places. And that's something that we have not even, the bike share industry has basically ignored families and has, I think besides the Portland, has ignored people with disabilities. And, these are not easy questions. And I've started taking my kids everywhere on my electric cargo bike, 3 kids on the back, and it's amazing. And if we can create a future with heterogeneous options that can help to solve specific problems, even large problems, I think we will get a huge amount of adoption in bike share.
Great. Thank you guys. That was all quite wonderful. You might have some more ideas there. I am going to move us into the full Q&A to the room. None of you posted any questions on Instagram, so go right to the tables.
Hey, Peter, can I interrupt for 1 second? I don't know whether this is intentional, but you put the private companies over here and the cities and nonprofits. Can we do just like a quick reshuffle to sit next to each other? Because it feels very segregated.
We want to move forward together.
Yeah, let's move forward together. So I'm going to get up and just move around a little.
We wanted you to get to that point yourselves and figure it out. It's like an art piece. We're trying to. Congratulations. Totally non-intentional, of course. Good observation, though. You guys are really on the ball. Congratulations. Okay, let's go to questions. Maybe you can come to the microphones. There are 2 on either side here. So their first question.
Hi, everyone. David White from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh is sort of a test bed right now for autonomous vehicle testing. We've seen some of the marketing materials today and over this conference from both Uber and Lyft that talk about their investments in transit integration, microtransit, small electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, scooters, bikes, car share, and other platforms that we don't even know about yet. I think I have some anxiety, and maybe others do in the room too, about 2 things in the future of bike share. Number 1 is that these companies commercialize the movement of people in a way that we're not even imagining right now. That they use the data sets. Being able to understand how people move around in one of those modes is powerful, but if you knew how people move in every single way that they move, it becomes incredibly powerful. So I have some anxiety about that. and I'd love to hear reactions about that. And then secondly, the future of bike share, I can easily picture an environment where there will be some cities that you go to, and it's just a Lyft city. That when you go there, you know that you need this product in order to access all those things. And another city, I think especially, I don't think this is a fear for cities that have really robust transit systems right now, but for these mid-sized cities without really strong public transportation, I think the private sector is already doing it better. But I worry that we'll get into an environment where you just have, that's the brand of that city. And so I'd like to hear some reactions, thoughts, reassurances about what the future of bike share looks like from that perspective.
Okay. Well, I'm very new to Lyft, I will caveat with that. I think this gets at the heart of the importance of public-private partnership. And as we think about scaling bike share and having a partner like Lyft as a partner, how we circle the things that squarely belong, the decisions that squarely belong on the public sector side and those that the private sector can help with. I don't think I have I don't think I have a simple answer to the really important point you made. But I will say that I think I joined Lyft because I think we are thinking about those questions internally. And hiring someone like me with my background, I think what I'm bringing to the table as we navigate those things is the perspective of having worked with cities throughout my career in partnership. And I know that's become like a buzzword and people sort of laugh and say like, oh, they're saying partnership again, but I think it really means something, and it will mean something more and more as we move in the direction that you're talking about.
I guess I would just, I think these are great questions. One of the things, as I come from a public sector, is, we're short of money for our infrastructure, right? I mean, we have hundreds of millions of dollars of deferred maintenance that we haven't done through our streets, our streetcar system. There's so much money that we could spend. And so the enticement for cities is there's new money coming in. And so I think it's great that we're having this conversation of how you balance this. So I don't think when they tore out the railroad tracks in Los Angeles to put in the freeways or whatever, they had a symposium like this to talk about it, right? I think we are trying to be intentional in terms of what we can do to improve the experience for our residents. And it's not only, I think, with the electrification is a big deal for us because what that means is kind of the environmental goals that we have as a city. So there are so many things that I think everyone has identified on this panel that makes it important for us to be intentional on how we implement systems, but that's why we're having this conversation, and that's why it's important for us to be aware as we move forward, because as public entities, there is only so much that we can do in terms of our tax base and in terms of what citizens are probably going to be willing to pay for. So how do we partner with some additional, with the private industry and as us regulators to make sure that it's as equitable as possible? So yeah, you're right, this is one of the really hard questions that we have to answer.
I just say that even after automated vehicles are commercialized at a big scale, I think these light electric vehicles and bikes and scooters that we're working in are still going to remain a very important part of the transportation ecosystem. They're very compact, they're very cost effective, and they're going to be probably still faster for most of these inner city trips. So I think there's still a big role for the industry that we're building right now, even in that context. I think public transit does have over the next 10 years, an interesting transition as if automation technology really matures and the cost per mile to the end consumer is actually cheaper on an automated vehicle than it is on a traditional bus route, I think that's going to cause some changes throughout the industry. So, I think those are all big picture questions, and I think public transit agencies are thinking about that now. What's their role in the ecosystem? But from the consumer's perspective, I think it's going to mean being able to get places more quickly and more affordably than ever before. And at least for the next several years, it's about providing a menu of choices, as many choices as possible, including public transit, because we're all still very much competing against the 95% of trips that happen in an automobile. When that becomes a problem, we'll have accomplished quite a lot.
Yeah, and I'm going to chime in as well. Anxiety resonates with me so much, you know. So thank you for saying that and naming that. Just that's what we're going through with PMJ as well. That I remember when we were on the phone with Zoe and with Fia, I was like, oh my God, there's so much that's going so rapid that it's actually hard to do an analysis of this. It's like we actually have to pause ourselves. Like, as excited as all the private corporations are to unveil all these new innovations, we actually have to take a pause. Like, we need to slow down a little bit. And it's scary to even see all these different AVs come out without people, again, getting a chance to weigh in on what's coming into their communities, right? And so I do agree with you around that anxiety, and we need to figure out together as a community, one, how to slow down the process, because I think I remember something called the CARS that came out really fast. Does everybody remember the CARS? Yeah, CARS did the same thing, where CARS were like really rolled out into our communities, even before there was infrastructure to actually take on the cars, right? And so I feel like we're kind of repeating a little bit of that history, and it's very much like, I guess, this Western type of thinking of go fast, create, without actually pausing to realize like the longer term impacts until it's then too late, and then we have crowded freeways and terrible pollution and immense amounts of landfills, right? So I just want us to think about that too, that it's okay to slow down the process so we can do this in a good way, in a right way, and one that actually serves the community.
Thank you for mentioning that, Rio, because if we're all experts here and we're anxious and confused, imagine what the outside of this room feels like. So thank you for bringing that up and keeping that.
I guess I would answer that question a little. So we, in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, we were very careful we wanted to have our bike share program move forwards through a contract. Because in the instance of a contract versus a permit, you have much more control, and you're really saying this entity with, you're contracting, it's a partnership, right? So you have a relationship, but you also have this legal document between you, and it allows you more flexibility, I think, and more control than you have in a permit. And so getting the terms of, I think I want to just reemphasize the need for NAPSA and the need for NACDO and sort of city-led organizations to help us really define the best practices around contracting and permitting. Because you can't, contracts and permitting can't do everything, but in this world of open data, and this world, the attention that's being paid to performance and to data, our permits on our contracts allow others to see what we're doing and opine on it. It's a much more open system, provided that we have the right resources to continuously craft the best practices. And so I share your anxiety, but I think it's a little bit of a sort of free-floating anxiety. I'm also a parent, so I get where that question comes from, but I think we have better tools than we've ever had before, and we have a lot of amazing people in this room and in academic institutions to help us think about that.
We had a question over here.
Hi, I'm Henry Morris from Houston Bikeshare. I'm curious if any of you have experienced, as you've been promoting Bikeshare and other forms of micromobility, if you've experienced it as a partisan political issue, and if not, if you see it becoming one, given that the systems generally serve dense urban areas.
In terms of partisan, no, because there's no Republicans in Portland. Sorry. No, I'm sorry. That was. Can you strike that from the record? Yeah. No. In terms of, I think our city is very progressive, and many progressive folks live here. So it's been more. I think it's been kind of an economic, and then, what does it bring for the city, and whether or not we divert other resources from there. So no, in terms of partisan, it's not been anything like that here.
I think that goes back to the question about funding, and as the private sector spends more on bike share, perhaps, that necessarily shouldn't mean that we let the public sector off the hook. Where you spend your money speaks to your priorities, and that means both from the public sector and the private sector side. So to make sure that we're not heading in that direction, which I'm not saying we are, especially now, I don't think we should be getting rid of public funding that goes to this very important social service.
Yeah, quick 2 cents. I think it's less partisan than most things in this country. There was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was a conservative like state senator or something in the Midwest who called Bikeshare like a UN plot or a conspiracy or something like that, and then like took a whole bunch of heat for it. And then I never heard another kind of conservative come out and say that again. So I think it's been a pretty bipartisan issue more than most, and particularly as it becomes privately funded, then everybody's happy. You know, but again, I think, yeah, that's it.
In New York, and I'm sure Carolyn would be able to attest to this because she worked for TA for so long, we went through an intense period of bike lash where the Upper West Side and Upper East Side folks who got money, like old money, are just like, bikes are evil, bikes will kill our city, bikes will kill us, your children, your dog. Like, we went through that, and it was insane. It's mostly because they like to stand in the bike lane and believe that nothing else matters than them. But in I guess it's a weird non-traditional sense. So like the rich people don't like the bikes. But in recent, like right now we're caught in this kind of, it's a poor person's thing. It's well-to-do people are not as concerned with the equity of the bikes. And so it's not a clear-cut Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative thing. It's am I comfortable and are they not comfortable? Because right now in New York, our ongoing issue is our bike law about e-bikes. And even cyclists who are avid are just like, I don't understand these classifications, but essentially what has been happening is that e-bikes are the delivery bikes that the mostly immigrant food delivery drivers ride, and they are illegal if they throttle. But there are e-bikes that roll out, including the ones that City Bike, which just put out a couple weeks ago. And so, I love you, City Bike. Here's the critique, of course. What has happened is our e-bikes have rolled out through City Bike, and those are allowed. And I know that they're allowed because City Bike is smart enough and has lawyers enough to make sure that they're in the right class, right? They're the right class of e-bike to exist. However, there's so much vagary that goes on about what's not allowed that there was that opportunity for the bike share operator to use their power, the desire for them to bring us this new technology, to leverage and bring attention to the fact that there's folks on other bikes that we still haven't figured out, and there's just a problem. We still have a problem. So it's not a partisan issue in the classic sense, but there's an issue where white privileged folks who are comfortable are letting themselves slide by again on their privilege and being okay with other people's tragedy, confusion, ambiguity. And I think that's what the division, if a division exists, is in bike share system, at least for us right now in New York.
I'll take up one piece that I think is partisan that is a problem. I don't think it's insurmountable, but we need to figure out a path forwards, is that you can't use commuter benefits for bike sharing. And we're never going to get that through Congress, at least not through this one, right? And as long as that's true, that has the ripple effect in all of our transit payment systems, right? So integrating bike share into the modernized fare payment systems that we have kind of doesn't work. It's a big kludge right now, and that is a significant hitch in the path towards the seamlessness that we really want in order to increase the mode share. And so I'm sure there are other technical solutions that we can come up with now that we have such great private sector players. Perhaps there's some workarounds, but that is a clearly partisan issue, right? Bike share, by being like transit, is subject to that same prejudice.
So on that note, we've come to the time, the end of our session. I want to say you guys were insightful, you were thoughtful, you were self-organizing in conversations about seating. You were inspiring, and I think that we've taken a lot from, just such a variety of great perspectives, and I think that's really going to lead us into our afternoon and tomorrow. I think we've also identified a new theme for next year, reducing our anxiety together, 2019. So that'll be really exciting. So I just want to give you a round of applause. You guys did an amazing job.